Hi, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. Today, Republicans find themselves running with Wallace. George Wallace, that is, the segregationist former governor of Alabama who ran as a third-party candidate against Richard Nixon in 1968. And while Nixon is remembered for his distinction of being impeached, just like Trump was, Chief White House correspondent at the New York Times, Peter Baker, argues that it's George Wallace, not Nixon, who is Trump's political doppelganger. Baker writes this, quote, Mr. Trump's talk of shooting looters, his bellicose denunciation of thugs and terrorists, his threats to unleash vicious dogs and ominous weapons, and his vow to call in troops to dominate the streets all evoke Wallace's inflammatory language more than Nixon's that year. The realization is slowly awakening Republicans to their political fate, which is today bleak. The Washington Post reports, quote, President Trump's incendiary responses to racial injustice protests and the coronavirus pandemic have left him politically isolated and profoundly weakened less than 5 months from the election, raising alarms among many Republicans about the party's prospects in November. A raft of fresh polling nationally and in battleground states shows Trump losing ground to presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden, a precipitous slide that has triggered deep distress within the GOP about the incumbent's judgment and instincts, as well as fears that voters could sweep the party out of power completely on Election Day. Why would they do that? Because you all watched a child throw lit matches on every wound in the country for 4 years? Bless your hearts. But even deep political anxiety doesn't appear to bring Republicans' souls back to their bodies. When confronted with the Trump tweet accusing a 75-year-old man who was knocked to the ground by police in Buffalo and seen bleeding from his head of being a hoax, Republican senators claim they lost their glasses or their Wi-Fi or their press secretaries or their minds.
I just saw the tweet, and I know nothing of the episode.
I didn't see it, so I'd have to. I mean, I'm sure that my office will be able to get me a copy of it, but I didn't see it.
Senator Cornyn, can you stop at the mics for a second? What do you make of the president's tweet this morning? Does the president need to be more cautious about what he tweets? Majority Leader McConnell, do you have any response to the president's tweet this morning? Does the president need to be more careful about what he tweets?
No real response to it, but
Why not?
I don't think it should be surprising in general because he tweets a lot.
Tape that will live forever. The New York Times details that reporters actually handed a lot of those Republicans copies of the tweet. And they add this bit of reporting, quote, even faced with documentary evidence of the president's inflammatory remark, most Republicans averted their gaze. The see no evil, hear no evil GOP and echoes of George Wallace are where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Sure, Steve Schmidt, that it lands like blows to everyone involved in the decades-long work to hear that we have a president who sounds like George Wallace. Talk about Republicans having nothing to say and just the tape that'll live forever of them sort of, stumbling past their microphones with their hands in their pockets.
I call that walk the geriatric shuffle, watching all of these Republican senators shuffle by with their hands in their pockets, nothing to say about the administration's ordering violence against peaceful protesters, not a word to be said about legendary Marine Corps General and former Secretary of Defense saying that Donald Trump is a danger to the Constitution. And we see Donald Trump's embrace of the Confederacy yet again today, his hoisting the Confederate flag, the Confederate battle flag, really as his campaign banner in a fundamental way. And so what we see with Trump is he's really historically, he's the second president of the Confederacy. This is exactly what the George Wallace presidency would have looked like. It would have been one of incitement and one of division. And one of the great tragedies for the Republican Party, which is founded in 1854, it was the party of the North and the West that has now become so deeply rooted in the old Confederacy in the South, where the symbols of the fallen South have now become the symbols of the Republican Party. That's historically tragic. And so I think that when you see Donald Trump's divisions and incitements, the American people are rejecting it. They're rejecting it all over the country, and you look demographically at how the country's changing, it's just a death knell for the Republican Party as they alienate literally everybody except white males over the age of 70, which are the hardcore, steadfast part of Trump's base as it continues to shrink under pressure from his incompetent performance and divisiveness in the country. And people are saying we can't do this for 4 more years.